Right, greetings everybody. Today is the 4th of January 2024. Hasn't the year flown by already? My wonderful guest today is none other than James Roguski. Let me bring him onto the stage. Hi James, Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me on. I've been having internet trouble all day, so I hope this works. But I've got some old news that is going to be brand new if people haven't heard it. So let me just dive right in. Uh, as many people may or may not know, I don't know. I've been reporting on the goings on of the WHO and the many different documents that they're trying to negotiate. And just to be clear, one of the things that I'm not going to be talking about today is what most people call the pandemic treaty. It's had many names. Currently, they're calling that the pandemic agreement. But as it is right now, it's being rewritten. And they're shooting for the end of January, sometime in February. Their next meeting for that is the end of February. And so, quite frankly, at this point, talking about the quote unquote pandemic treaty, it's old news. We're waiting for the new version. And so, what I want to talk about, and we will be talking about, are the proposed amendments to the international health regulations, which the IHR is an already existing international agreement. I feel that it's illegitimate, but be that as it may, that goes all the way back to 1969. They made a bunch of amendments in 2005. They pretended to do a bunch of amendments in 2022. We can talk about that in a little bit. But supposedly, they are in the middle of a year-long secret negotiations. They did present to us more than a year ago on September 30th, 2022, 197 pages of amendments from 94 countries to an 84-page document. So needless to say, they're hoping to change a lot. And the plan had been to have a meeting at the December 7th and 8th. They were supposed to get their final version put together, submit it in mid-December to what's known as the International Health Regulations Review Committee, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, because they have a very strict deadline of January 27th, a couple of weeks from now, to submit the final version, because Article 55 of the regulations says that they have to make it formally submitted 4 months in advance of the May meeting. Now, they have a World Health Assembly once a year at the end of last week of May. This year, it begins on May 27th. So their deadline is January 27th. Well, all the way back in October, at the meeting that they had prior to the December meeting, their co-chairperson, Dr. Abdullah Asiri, stated very plainly that they're not going to meet their deadline. Now, you would think that somebody in the news media would report on that, but it might as well have been invisible.
Dear colleagues, we have been operating with the understanding that the package of the proposed amendments resulting from the work of this group would be finalized by January 2024 to meet the 4-month deadline stated in Article 55. However, we believe that we all share the same sentiment that realistically, the whole package of amendments will probably not be ready by January 2024.
Okay. And so then they, wheeled out their legal counsel, Stephen Solomon, who essentially read Article 55 of the International Health Regulations. There's not that much to read. It's very clear there aren't really any loopholes. It says nations can submit amendments, but they have to do so formally 4 months in advance of the May Assembly.
we would like to ask the Secretariat whether procedurally we could continue working until the 76th World Health Assembly in May 2024. I'd like to ask the Secretariat to provide some guidance in this matter.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The Health Assembly, in decision WHA 75-9, requested the working group, and I quote, to establish a program of work consistent with decision EB 153 and taking into consideration the report of the IHR Review Committee to propose a package of targeted amendments for consideration by the 77th World Health Assembly in accordance with Article 55 of the International Health Regulations, close quote. Article 55 of the IHR, which is referred to in Decision 75-9, sets out two procedural requirements relating to proposed amendments. The first one is that, quote, proposals for amendments shall be submitted to the Health Assembly for its consideration, close quote. The second one is that, open quote, the text of any such proposed amendment shall be communicated to all states parties by the Director General at least 4 months before the Health Assembly at which it is proposed for consideration, close quote. Again, that's the text of the relevant article of the IHR, Article 55.
And so, this is actually really good news. And people should be spreading the word that, hey, look, we need to watch them like a hawk because I have no doubt that they will try to cheat. I'm sure if no one's paying attention, they'll try to slip something in, after the deadline or just before the assembly or whatever. But the rule is very simple. Come January 27th, if they have not made public whatever the heck it is they've been negotiating for the last year or more, then they don't get to make any changes in May. And, they can come back in 2025. I'll be here waiting for them. But if they don't submit a final version in really just a couple of weeks from when we're doing this, January 27th, they have failed. And
so they have Article 55 where you just they have 4 months. They need to give the text of the proposed amendments 4 months before the next meeting, like you said, in May, and that's so that nations can read those documents, isn't it? And if as you said, we've had Dr. Abdullah say that they're not going to be ready. It doesn't give the nations time to look at the paperwork.
The idea here is that Article 55, in its basic purpose, is intended to support the principle of fair and due notice. And fair notice means that notice is timely and complete.
Right. Now, you may or may not be aware, but it's kind of sort of a lousy memory from our past. I believe it was with Obamacare. Nancy Pelosi at the time said, "Oh, here's this 1,000-page bill. Just vote for it. You can read it after we adopt it."
Oh, yeah.
And in the U.S. Congress, they do that kind of thing. It shows up at the last minute. And they vote on it. Nobody even knows what it says because they don't have a rule in Congress like Article 55. They should. Right? Every legislature should have a rule where, okay, if you want to propose something, whatever the final version is, it's got to sit there for a while so everybody can actually understand it, especially when it's thousands of pages long. Well, Article 55 is such a rule with the international health regulations. And, it's astonishing. It's almost like people have been vaccinated to be immune to good news. Right? I'm not claiming victory just yet, okay? Because when the meeting in May is over and it's June 2nd or whenever it may be over, if they have not adopted anything, okay, then we'll have a little celebration maybe. I have every expectation that they would certainly try to cheat if we don't pay attention. And so many other things could happen. Any nation could say, oh, well, the working group has failed to get everybody to agree, but any individual nation could submit whatever they felt they wanted to have discussed. And if they do so before January 27th, that would count. A group of nations could do something like that. Any one of a number of groups of nations could collectively work together and put forth some proposal. But the working group back, it's more than 3 months ago now, on October 2nd, said, no, we're not going to make it. And it's astonishing to me. Everybody's kind of sort of freaking out. There's a lot of fear mongering going on about all of, what might be.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here looking at the fact that they said they're not going to submit a final document. So, hey, next, if they want to come back in 2025, we'll see what happens by then. But
So
this is actually fantastic news that people should be spreading.
A note on this deadline of the 77th World Health Assembly. If the deadline is not met, the WJHR would be expected to report to the Health Assembly in May 2024 that agreement could not be reached on the proposed amendments. This deadline cannot be changed as it was set out in decision WHA 759. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that explanation. So the deadline is a deadline. There are no intentions to delay any deadlines. However, what we are looking as a group is how to procedurally proceed from now until the deadline, and that's what Steve has explained.
So assuming that the World Health Assembly do stick with what is written down in Article 55, that they must give it 4 months previously, supposing they do stick with that, it's positive that then they wouldn't be, the working group wouldn't be able to submit these amendments, and then they would have to come back in 2025. So that's the positive thing for people to be thinking about. Up until recently, we've had many petitions going around, Canada, Australia, UK to exit the WHO. And we've had the UK petition was ignored. The petition in Canada was ignored. The petition in Australia was ignored. The UK was a little bit different because they actually had 21 days where that was in Parliament and could be debated, but people, for whatever reason, whether they didn't realise that protocol existed, that didn't happen, and ultimately it was ignored. I'm just wondering, and I don't want to be one of these fear-mongering people, but is there the potential for the same thing to be happening here with the amendments to the international health regulations, that they turn up in May to the World Assembly with the documents and say, oh, well, nobody really needs 4 months to read it anyway. We're just going to push it through, and ignore the processes like they did in the UK with the petition. And, like you just said in America, how they can put 1,000 pages through. Is there a risk they can do that in May?
There is every possibility that they intend to do that. And in fact, I think that they would, if given any opportunity to cheat in that fashion, I think they would take it. They've already scheduled meetings for February and April. And okay, you can keep negotiating. And then in May, you can report on your failure to get it done this year. And you can keep trying and come back around next year. That's fine. But no, you're absolutely right. They have every intention of cheating if we don't pay attention and hold them to the deadline. Now, just to show you how bad they are willing to cheat, prior to starting, this interview, we talked a little bit about the package of amendments that were purportedly adopted in 2022. There was a small number of amendments that you were talking about. The petition wanted to have a debate in Canada and Australia and the UK. That small collection of amendments, as it turned out, in 2022, the WHO never actually conducted a vote. They just said they did.
Yep.
On May 28th, 2022, they published a document with the changes that were, or I should say, the new version of a handful of articles in the IHR. They had it labeled as an authentic document by their legal counsel. And on the bottom, they said it was all done during their 8th meeting of the assembly. But all of the meetings are recorded. And if you watch the 8th meeting of the plenary session, May 28th, 2022, they never bothered to have a vote on that document. And so on November 28th of 2023, a little more than a month ago, a dozen members of the European Parliament wrote a letter to the WHO, to the Director General, Tedros, and said, we can't see any record that a vote was ever properly held. And without that, unless you produce some evidence that there was a vote, these amendments are null and void. And so while the vast majority of all nations missed their opportunity to reject those amendments, I haven't seen the exact specific letter from New Zealand, but the rumor is that they did submit a rejection in time. But it's all a moot point because they never actually voted for the darn thing.
Yeah.
And that should be a scandal. That
should be.
Talk about fraud. So your question was, do I think that they're capable of trying to sneak in, without obeying the rules? Oh, absolutely. If they could pretend to vote on something and think that nobody's going to pay attention and notice, they'll get away with whatever they can get away with. We need to be very vigilant and spread the word to make sure everybody's paying very, very close attention.
The co-chairs noted that, in reference to decision WHA 75-9, it appeared unlikely that the package of amendments would be ready by January 2024, in particular the proposed amendments that cover topics common to both the WG, IHR and INB processes. Just looking around the room if there are any other interventions. India, please.
Why is there 55-2? I mean, I'm sure there is a very good reason. So if legal can just remind me.
Thank you, India. If our legal colleagues are ready to respond, I'll hand them the floor, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and thank you very much, India. So the relevant reference here is WHA 75-9, of course. It's paragraph 2F, which provides that the package of amendments for consideration by the 77th World Health Assembly will be done in accordance with Article 55 of the IHRs, with the totality of Article 55.
What can people watching do to bring light to this so that we can get more people, more hawks watching the WHO and the amendments and what they're up to?
Well, the starting point is if you were playing any kind of a board game, chess or checkers or Monopoly or whatever game you might imagine, if you're playing and you don't know the rules and someone else does know the rules to the point where they will bend them to the nth degree and even break them if you let them, you're going to get creamed. And so we know the rules. The rules are plain. They need to know that millions of people know the rules. They know the deadline, and we're speaking out about it, saying, hey, we're waiting for your public presentation. where is it? You can submit it anytime before January 27th, but if you submit it after, sorry, we'll see you in 2025. You don't get to change anything in 2024 unless we get to see what those changes are before January 27th, 2024.
Yeah. And I think particularly, it is the new year. It's the 4th of January 2024. This year, everybody, there's a lot of redirection happening already with the election in the US with Trump, with Epstein's list. This. I'm sure it's going to be a really boring list anyway. But all these distractions, all these redirections, when this is happening this year with the World Health Organization, the International Health Regulation Amendments, and even more so, we need the people talking about it, because I'm sure they want to bring it along on May, just put it under everybody's nose. Go, here we go, here it is. Nobody talk about it. Nobody, just like we've just mentioned those other amendments of which there was no actual vote, and it's taken a few years for a letter to end up under Ted Ross's nose. This year with the IHR amendments is not the year for that to happen again. That's for sure.
No,
So
they are on the cusp of failing, and that's good news, but that's not a reason to just sit back and not work even harder to just push them back far enough so that as soon as we find out that they've failed with the amendments, millions of people need to know that they're not in a position to even consider them. Then the focus will turn to the proposed treaty or agreement, whatever they want to call it. So, this is not a time to sit back and do nothing. This is a time to, charge forward, because we're on the cusp of victory. I'm not claiming it just yet, but things are looking good, and people need to start speaking more positively about what is it that we want. Not just to stop them from doing what they want, but to move forward with what is it that we, the people, demand. And so, good news to start off the year, but we have to spread the word so people know, because the mainstream media is certainly not going to do it. And even the alternative media is dropping the ball on this. So, thank you very much for the opportunity. I always give my phone number to people if they want to call me and ask any questions. It's 310-619 3055. I'm in California in the United States. 310-619-3055. You can use phone or text, but you can also use WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal. And all of the information is on jamesroguski.substack.com. And spread the word, share this video, and tell as many people as you possibly can. You can have a little bit of fun with it. You can go up to anybody and go, hey, do you know what's not going to happen by January 27th, 2024, and why that matters? And, it's an icebreaker, a conversation starter. It's something to talk about, wherever you may be, because the vast majority of people, why would they have any idea? Because the media is not talking about it.
That's right. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And we've got Australia Day coming up. Oh, am I allowed to call it that anymore? Australia Day coming up, and everybody will be gathering with their friends and family. So without starting fights with people, you can say that, do you know what, and have those conversations when you're with people that perhaps might not have heard about it, and even people who have maybe don't know all the details and all those sorts of things. So I'll put all your links in the description as well for everybody to go along and check out your Substack and so on and so forth to get more information. And couldn't agree more. Spread the word, James. I appreciate you joining me today to tell us all about IHR amendments and something positive. I think it is. Yeah, I think it's great.
Well, have a great New Year, and thank you very much.
Thanks, James.